We are back with you live once again for another Johnnie Torch live broadcast. This is also a Johnnie Torch Reviews, and I wanted to make the show live tonight, though, just in case anybody's interested in, maybe leaving some questions in the chat if I fail to cover something that was in the first 3 parts of the epic crossover miniseries extravaganza known as Crisis on Infinite Earths, CW's big deal. This is only the second time this year where all the superheroes from one comic book company have banded together for the sake of the universe itself. And who would have thought that? Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk that we would have gotten Avengers Endgame in essentially the same calendar year as Crisis on Infinite Earths? Alright, so I watched all 3 parts, and I took copious notes, so I am going to get into the details here. So this is probably not going to be, as much as I'll try to make this a pretty brief stream, I imagine this is going to go close to an hour, because we're going to talk about all 3 parts in detail. And it's going to be very, very spoilery. We're going to give all the spoilers here, so we're going to talk in detail. So if you haven't seen all the episodes yet, you might want to hold off on watching this video until after you've watched it in its entirety, as they say. But yeah, we're going to start with the first one. Before we get into the spoilers, I guess if you want my general all-around opinion, I was generally pleased. I wouldn't say that it surprised me in any way. It was pretty much what I expected it to be. It didn't disappoint me in that I had my expectations in check. For example, I knew there were only going to be glorified cameos of a lot of these characters and actors that were reprising these famous characters. So that didn't really disappoint me, since I knew pretty much that's the way it was going to be. The tone of the series, thus far at least, seems very comic book heavy. That's one of the things I appreciated about it. Unlike, say, last season's Elseworlds, which I enjoyed a lot. Elseworlds started off strong and then kind of petered out. I think this was consistently good all along. At least for the 3 parts that we've seen. There's 2 more parts in the story, and they're going to begin being broadcast in January of next year. I think January 14th, if I remember correctly. But this did feel consistent. It didn't feel like they stopped everything to, like Crisis on Earth X, where it was like, well, let's stop everything and have a fling between Sarah and Alex. And, the crossover, I think even before that, it was about stuff going on between Oliver and Felicity that was going to lead to the painful, I think, Season 4 breakup stuff. This felt very much like they were on point. They didn't stray from the narrative for too long, at least. But we're going to get to that in a moment. So yeah, generally a positive review this is going to be. I think it's generally positive. My opinions on this, pretty good. So now we'll get into the spoilers, and you've been warned. If I was to give it a rating, I don't know if I can give this one a rating, seeing as how it's not a completed piece. We're only going to review the first 3 chapters. Otherwise, we would just, sit on the review for another 4 weeks or something during the winter hiatus. But I figure it's best to just review it in 2 parts. And I think a lot of people probably are doing that too on YouTube. Okay, so part 1, let's start. This was, I think, the Supergirl episode. It was very Supergirl heavy. Understandably so, because it was her episode. They started off with Will Wheaton getting a cameo. I didn't understand that, really, to be totally honest with you. I don't want to, I can't talk and run the show at the same time, so let me just check this out. No, press the wrong one. Yeah, this was the one I was supposed to. Okay. We gotta get the crawl on here. And there we go. There we go. Okay, so this is just a reminder, of course, to hit like, share, and subscribe. Check out my comic, The Adventures of Bullets, Bourbon, Private Eye. Link in the description below. and so on and so forth. That's just a constant reminder for you. I don't know how many people really pay attention to the ticker. I really don't. But it's always there. And also, it reminds you that we have a show that we do every Saturday. And stay tuned this Saturday, because we are going to do the Wonder Woman trailer and the Ghostbusters Afterlife trailer. Really excited to look into those and give my reaction. But again, let us not digress too much from the topic. Yeah, Will Wheaton, kind of an interesting choice. I don't know, is he... I know he's a Star Trek alum, but does he have anything to do with the superhero genre? Not too familiar with that if he is. Other than he's just a fan, maybe, and he begged on, but he was holding the sign, "The world of the end is nigh," or whatever it is, from Superman 2. Oh man, there are Superman Easter eggs out the wazoo in this show, and it's great because everybody loves those movies, regardless how good or bad the Arrowverse is at any given moment. They do have a reverence for where it all began, really, which is the Donnerverse. And so, yeah, that was in Superman 2, there was a derelict guy. I always thought he looked like Christopher... what's his name? From Taxi. He looked like that. What was his name? I can't believe I'm forgetting his name now. Doc Brown. Everybody knows and loves this guy. But that's the pitfalls of doing this live. But yeah, anyhow, so that's how it starts off, with a Will Wheaton cameo and a Superman 2 Easter egg. The problem with the first episode, I think, was a lot of setup. But that's understandable. I don't grade this too strictly when you have to set up something. Now, you would think that they had plenty of time to set this up in their own series, but then you have to remember, not everybody watches each and every series, not everybody watches each and every episode of every series. For instance, I haven't caught up with Batwoman since the first episode. I've only seen the pilot. So they're mentioning things that I am vaguely aware of. I haven't caught up with Black Lightning, so I had no idea what was going on with him when he ends up getting transported back. I seen the first, I don't know, half dozen episodes. So this is, that's kind of why you need to have setup in the first episode. Let's see. Now, one of the best things that was good was we got to see Katie Lotz and Stephen Amell interact. That was one of the highlights of the first episode for me. I've always said they should have been the Black Canary and Green Arrow of this universe. Of course, a cruel fate decided otherwise. The Olicity shippers pushed heavily for Felicity, and again, I am not a strongly anti-Felicity voice. I don't dislike Felicity. I wouldn't have chosen her to be the leading lady of the show. Again, this is nothing against Emily Bett Rickards. This is more of just the character. But, as a purist, and you're going to hear me say that a couple of times probably during this show, but as a purist, I think Green Arrow belongs with Black Canary. It's ironic that we've had two different shows on CW where Green Arrow has not ended up with Black Canary, and I think we're going to have a big budget movie before we see Green Arrow and Black Canary actually together. Of course, Sarah ended up becoming White Canary, which was good because we got to keep her in the Arrowverse. She was originally killed off, brought back. We'll get into that later as well. But that was a special moment for me because I think it really starts with them two, even though arguably Laurel Lance is more important to him than Sarah, but the fact that he was actually on the island with Sarah, I think that makes it a little more appropriate that they kind of have a moment. Then we have the send-off with baby Jonathan, because we start with Clark and Lois still on Argo City, and they do a very abbreviated version of the send-off from Donner's Superman, where they sort of politically correctly allow both of them to speak some of the dialogue, Clark and Lois. And they send baby Jonathan off, and this seemed like a subplot that went nowhere, to be totally honest with you. I don't really understand the significance of the subplot, other than to just give them an excuse to give that dialogue and to shoot baby Jonathan off into space in a very similar fashion of Kal-El. The only other thing, I think the reason why they did this was also it was an excuse to give us another meaningful scene between, you know, Oliver and Sarah. They go to, I forget, what was it, 2040 Star City, right? Was that what it was? Or was it a parallel Earth, Star City? Either way, they go to an aged Oliver Queen, and I have a feeling this was sort of to give another meaningful interaction between the two of them, but they didn't want to do it with current-day Oliver because it wouldn't look too good because he's married, I suppose, to Felicity, and it would, you know, cause the ire of the Felicity shippers to be rankled if we see another touching moment between Sarah and current continuity Oliver. I don't know, but again, it was kind of a subplot that was just there to be there, apart from that. All right, let's talk about Tyler Hoechlin's Superman once again. He's got to have his powers nerfed compared to Supergirl. Again, this bugged me. They're both using their heat vision against the Tower of Terror or whatever it is. And Superman's power gives out first, and then Kara, whatever, 90 seconds later. And to be honest with you, I'm trying to think, even earlier in the episode, it seems like Superman's always got to be the weakest person in the room. This version of Superman, a Tyler Hoechlin Superman, for some reason, they got to make him the most weakest person in the room no matter what. He's constantly getting, I don't know, the side eye, and he's like, it doesn't seem like the Arrowverse characters treat him with the respect and gravitas that is befitting of the pound-for-pound king of superheroes. And that kind of bothered me. Again, I don't understand why they are doing that with Superman in this, because they are treating the character with respect overall. They're treating the character with respect, I believe, but, I mean, you know, unlike, say, let's say, for instance, the Henry Cavill Superman, where Snyder turned him into, like, an emo, you know, moody and brooding character. This Superman is still, you know, hopeful and, you know, trying to be an example to humanity and all the great things we think about Superman. But it seems like, you know, he has a position on the team that would probably go to Aquaman or, you know, maybe even Green Arrow if this was a really accurate JLA production. He's sort of just there. He doesn't take a leadership role in anything. And considering that they're supposedly going to give him his own series next year, Superman and Lois, one would think they're going to try to beef up his role in this and show him as, you know, a leader of men and so on and so forth. I don't know. I just felt like they didn't do him any favors, let's put it that way. I kind of felt that Allura was done dirty. She ends up dying on Argo City, and I guess it's going to depend on how they salvage this universe. Now, I can only imagine, again, spoilers, jumping ahead to the third episode, all the Earths are destroyed by the end of this. So, obviously, some of these Earths are going to come back, at least the Earth 1, so that we can still have these shows continue on. But the question is, since Supergirl's planet was destroyed and they saved 1 billion people, it begs the question, are they going to migrate those billion people back to Earth 38? Or, you know, if that planet comes back? Or are they just going to integrate with this Earth? That also raises another group of questions going forward, where you have 1 billion people from Earth 38 America trying to integrate now into the, I don't know how many billion people are in America right now. Is it 7 billion? It's kind of, and you have to consider that these new, you know, refugees, so to speak, are doppelgangers of people already in Earth 1. Again, it's kind of, it's opening a can of worms that I don't know how they're going to address going forward unless they do migrate these refugees back to Earth 38. I liked the focus on Alex and Lena for a couple of scenes. That was pretty cool. I like what they've done with Lena this season. And I've said that in a couple of other videos of the Torch News Roundup. But I like what they've done with Lena. And I like that she's still reserved. I don't think she was ever completely evil. But, you know, it's playing with some good shading of characters. Where, you know, a character doesn't necessarily have to be evil to be hurt or vengeful or standing apart from the heroes and the comrades, you know, and she does feel like she stands apart. I don't have a problem with her actually even turning evil if they choose to go that far, but I don't think that's what they're going to do, and that's probably for the best not to. We got a crash course on Pariah. Now, the way they left the cliffhanger for the crisis with the last episode of all the shows was Nash Wells becoming Pariah. And for some reason, I don't know, I guess he's sort of the watcher of the DC universe, right? It seems like he keeps saying that I'm being forced to bear witness or something like that to events or whatever. It's kind of strange. I think it's punishment for his hubris because he, I don't know, dared to challenge the Monitor, the Anti-Monitor. I don't know. It just didn't feel like we got deep enough into that character to understand too much about why suddenly he had powers, why they gave him powers, why he was doing this stuff. Again, it's great to see Tom Cavanaugh getting a role in this because, you know, he's great in every part he's played so far in the Arrowverse. He's been great. I really like the focus that he was given here, but again, they could have fleshed him out a little more for me to understand really what was going on with him. I don't really know what they were using him for, why they gave him these powers to do these kind of things. I don't know. He kind of was also like a Loki character where he sort of, I don't know. He's not, his powers are not clearly defined. That's what I felt about it anyway. All right, I also want to touch on the brief cameos we got, of course, of Burt Ward as Dick Grayson. A cameo even shorter than I thought it was going to be. Like I said, of course, I figured it wasn't going to be too much with these cameos of these characters. I was hoping maybe that they would have some kind of interaction in some cases, like in this case with Burt Ward. I was kind of hoping he was going to be in Gotham and, you know, interact with Batwoman and Supergirl and just say something, you know, say something witty to them and go. But of course he did still say something witty. But this is kind of like what I meant, though, where it didn't exceed my expectations, where I kind of figured we'd just get some of these drop-in, drop-out cameos. And Burt Ward was one of them. But it was great to see him there. And I'm glad that he showed up. We didn't get to see Mark McClure's cameo, unfortunately. I was hoping he was going to show up at some point in this, but he doesn't. We got the Birds of Prey cameo. I never even saw the pilot, so I have no emotional attachment to that. Of course, they're going to, because it's a CW show, they're going to make every effort to approach, you know, Birds of Prey fans. I was surprised we didn't get a Gotham cameo. I honestly thought they were going to do something, but because that's a Fox program, I think they didn't feel the need to reach out to them, which I think was kind of petty if that is the case. They did do a Titans cameo. I think it was, what was it, Hawk and Jason Todd, just briefly. Again, going forward, I don't know exactly what this means for these shows. Are they going to be, you know, folded into the Arrowverse at some point? That they're existing in the same universe? I don't know. Yeah, there was a couple more important cameos that were much more important that we'll get to in a moment. But before we wrap up part one, Ollie died from ghosts. This was kind of, I mean, I like the big showdown where everybody, you know, all hands on deck. They always have this kind of a thing, you know, an Avengers moment where they all kind of step up and, you know, Mia gets a costume, which was nice. Although the costume to me is so generic. Doesn't particularly even look green, at least from the, I don't know, from the views I've seen of it. Doesn't even particularly look green. There's no hood. I don't know. It just seems very blah, and I really wish they would give her some kind of a costume that reflects her status as, I guess, allegedly the next Green Arrow. As I say all the time, I'm not a fan of mantle passings where, you know, I would have preferred that she be called Artemis or something else. I mean, like Young Justice, there was an Artemis, and I know that's not the daughter of Oliver Queen, although I don't think in the comics he has a daughter, as far as I know. But yeah, maybe if they give her a mask or something that kind of evokes more of the Green Arrow. At this point, it just, I don't know. The costume didn't really do anything for me. But yeah, so Oliver has like that heroic moment where they're evacuating Earth 38, and he kind of, last man standing, he stands up to the rest of these ghosts, which, I don't know exactly what they were. Shadow demons or something? Again, I maybe... You know, I haven't read the Crisis original novel. I mean, I would say I gave it a cursory reading maybe as a kid, but I don't have it and haven't pored over it, so I don't know exactly what goes on in that. It's the same thing with the Infinity War stories. I would flip through them as a kid, and it was like some bald woman and some floating character or something, and it's like, this isn't really, you know, what I want to tune into, you know. So I understand when, like, Avengers Infinity War and Crisis on Infinite Earths on the CW, they don't want to evoke some of these characters like Adam Warlock and stuff that people really don't know unless you're really inside baseball with these original stories. And so it's kind of the same thing here where, you know, we don't get probably as accurate a version of the original story, but it may be for the better. They are paying tribute to a lot of those characters. For example, Pariah and Harbinger, I believe, are important parts of that Crisis storyline. So Oliver died in the first part, and again, this was blatantly a swerve. You know, I mean, I didn't think this was the last we were going to see of Oliver. And it was quite obvious that to kill him in the first episode, they were going to bring him back and do something with him more constructive, which we'll get to eventually. But, you know, it was a decent death scene. I would have preferred if we actually saw him going down. I kind of resented the fact that we see, you know, like I said, him standing up to these ghost creatures, and the next thing you know, he's, like, battered and just, like, at death's door. I would have honestly preferred a Boromir-type finish for him. I mean, I think that's the right character, right? Boromir, who's the guy that went down with the arrows, and that would have been pretty fitting, right? Green Arrow going down like Boromir. That won't be the last Lord of the Rings reference I make tonight. But, again, just to see him just, like, on his feet 1 minute and then half dead the next. Again, this is something that there's the problem of that you only have 5 episodes to tell the story. And in a lot of places, it did feel like that. I just wish they stretched it out. This was the first case where I think they could have stretched it out. Like I said, spare me the Jonathan Kent in space story and give me a little bit more of Ollie going down. It only needed to be another 2 minutes. But, you owe it to Amell to kind of see him go out like that. But of course, like I said, I understood fully what was going on. We weren't going to get the death of Oliver Queen right there. So, again, it kind of is what it is. All right, let's jump over now to Part 2. Part 2, we got a Leonard Snart cameo. This, again, was a bit... an interesting choice. They got a Mick Rory from another timeline, I think, or another planet, another universe. I'm not sure why they did that. Sarah has the funny joke where she says, I promised them they wouldn't have to get involved in another crossover. And you also have, what's her name? Killer Frost doing another joke like that where she says, this is Ralph's first crossover. And this kind of self-awareness was pretty funny. I really like that. I think a lot of people might have felt that might have been over the top, but I thought, I mean, maybe coming from Killer Frost over the top, but I thought it was pretty funny. That was some nice touches of humor. So I guess they could only get in Wentworth Miller as a voiceover. That's kind of disappointing. I would like to see him in the flesh. What really crossed my mind when we were going to this other planet, or this other Earth's Wave Rider, I thought we were going to see Rip. I thought we were going to get Rip Hunter back for a couple episodes. They've really done Rip dirty in the Arrowverse, because they wanted Sarah to be the captain and have her be the star of the show, which is understandable. She's really the most popular and enjoyable character on that show, but at the same time, I really felt that they did Rip dirty, because he was the only character on that show that wasn't an out-and-out screw-up. I mean, that is not to say that he was flawless in the way he handled the Wave Rider and this and that, but he came from a time and, an organization where he knew what he was doing. It wasn't really just them being screw-ups the way that they eventually became as the show went on. I seen the trailer for the new season, and oh boy, it seems like they're doubling down on last season. I think by all accounts, last season everybody thought was a disaster. Unfortunately, it looks like they're doubling down going forward with Legends of Tomorrow, which, like I said, I understand it being a kitschy and, wink-wink kind of show. But they have to remember it's a superhero show, and I think they're not doing that. They're more doing the goofy stuff. And I don't know. We'll talk about that when that happens. All right, so here we got some heavy hitters for guest stars in this one. Let's talk about Tom Welling and the Smallville cameo scene, whatever you want to call it. This is what a lot of people were looking forward to. This was the resolution of 10 years of Smallville. And I have to say, as a non-Smallville fan, I watched the show off and on. And just to give a crash course on my opinions of Smallville, I didn't like it in the first half of the show, because the seasons were basically about just Dawson's Creek style with Superman. The only difference is he couldn't become Superman because he was learning to be Superman. That was the idea of the show. Dawson's Creek with superpowers, but he never put on the costume. Then the second half of the series, they realized that they couldn't keep that going for very long. At some point, Clark has to become Superman. Or even Superboy at some point, if you want to do that. But eventually, he has to become Superman, and Tom Welling was not willing to actually embrace the role of Superman. He was going to play Clark Kent, and that was it. So the second half of the series was very much about trying to fit in all the DC Universe, side characters, where we got Aquaman, we got Cyborg and Bart Allen and so forth. And we got many of the heavy hitters as villains. We got Zod, we got Doomsday. But then we never really capitalized on getting Superman. And so I wasn't satisfied with either portion of the series, where it was like, well, we're going to play it straight, and he's not Superman, he's going to become Superman. Then we get to the point where, well, he should have been Superman at this point, but, we can't really get Welling to commit to it, so we'll just bring in Green Arrow, we'll bring in a bunch of heavy hitters and villains, and just carry on from there. Okay, we get someone in the chat. I don't know if I can pronounce your name, but hi, thank you for joining us. We're talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. We're in the middle of part 2, or we're talking about part 2, so if you have any questions or comments, I'll be sure to read them, and thank you for checking it out. All right, so I'm talking about the Tom Welling portion of the second episode. Again, as someone who's not a big fan of Smallville, I have to say that they pretty much gave Tom Welling what he wanted. They gave him what he deserved. They gave him a Superman that did not stay Superman for very long. Honestly, it took like 10 years to get Clark to embrace the mantle of Superman, and then here we are 10 years later when he's like pushing 40, and he already gave up the mantle of Superman. I mean, if that doesn't encapsulate Smallville as a series, I don't know what does. It was a hero dragged kicking and screaming to the threshold of being a superhero, only to just give up his powers, give it all away, and chop wood on the farm with his extremely hot wife. And apparently he has 2 daughters. So in this Earth, he doesn't have Jonathan, he has daughters, which, that's fine. I don't know. That didn't mean anything to me, but I don't know if that's lore in the comics. I know there was a Smallville comic that carried on, quote-unquote, seasons of Smallville, but anyway, yeah, that kind of felt fitting, and we had Luthor jumping from world to world trying to destroy Superman. That felt like a very Luthor-ish plan. I really like John Cryer as Luthor. I think he's a great Luthor, and I'm pretty picky on my Luthor depictions. My favorite Luthor is Gene Hackman, and I think Cryer channels just enough of Hackman along with a more, a sinister vibe. I think that's kind of what maybe Kevin Spacey was going for in Superman Returns, and I think Cryer may have sort of, he excelled at what Kevin Spacey was trying to do, which was try to take the kind of goofy-ish, kind of, wisecracking Luthor and give him like a sinister edge. And I think that's what John Cryer does very well. I still would get rid of the beard if I was him, but I don't know. I guess they're trying to make him look a little different, to give him some character or something. I don't know. All right, so let's see. We're jumping around a bit. But let's get to the Kingdom Come Superman. This is the Superman played by Brandon Routh. That is the continuation in spirit, if not in true essence, I suppose, of the Christopher Reeve Superman from the Donner-verse, the Donner films. And again, this is going to take some backstory about my opinions on Superman Returns and Brandon Routh. I love Brandon Routh's Superman performance. I don't like Superman Returns and the continuity therein. I think it was a very messed up story where you have Superman as an absentee father, something I think would never happen. You also had, it was very much a retread. It was basically before The Force Awakens. It was what The Force Awakens is to Star Wars, Superman Returns is to the Donnerverse Superman. It's basically a retread with a different, with a different story, with a different cast. But instead of basically Superman foiling a land scheme from Luthor, he foils a land scheme that has to do with recreating Krypton or something. It's not the most compelling story. And like I said, we also have the strange storyline where Superman doesn't reveal his identity to Lois, but then again, he has a child with her. At the end of the film, it still doesn't seem like he's revealed his identity to Lois, and he kind of has to give up his role as father because I guess she's not married to Richard White, but there's still a relationship there, and it's a very convoluted and disjointed story that I was glad to see not continued on. So that's why I kind of bristled at the thought of bringing back Routh's Superman, although I do really like Routh as Superman. I thought he was fine. I thought he did an even better Clark Kent. He really channels the Christopher Reeve style of, kind of a bumbling and earnest but clumsy Clark Kent, and a very stoic and heroic Superman, someone to look up to. I think he plays it very well. So I was happy to see him back donning the costume. This is the quote-unquote Kingdom Come Superman, which I guess he's an aged Superman. He's aged and gray, and he's sort of seen hardships. I wasn't too thrilled with the storyline. Again, as I said earlier, I wanted to see like a cameo of Mark McClure. I wanted to see if they could recapture that feeling of the Donnerverse. They didn't really even try. They say that the entire supporting cast, I guess, of Superman in this planet and on this universe has been killed by, I guess, Luthor dropping a gas bomb or something, and killing the whole Daily Planet. And he did not succumb to darkness. That's what was pretty heroic about it, is that Reeves' Superman is incorruptible, or so we think. Now, we have Luthor jumping from planet to planet trying to destroy the Supermen, using the Book of Destiny, which, of course, the Monitor brings back. And he sort of makes temporarily Superman into a villain. I thought that was pretty cute, though, where he says, oh, this isn't the first time I had to fight myself. Another wink and homage to Superman 3, which I guess is continuity with the Superman Returns continuity, right? Because a lot of people said, well, Superman Returns is a sequel to Superman 2, and they were going to ignore 3 and 4, but to be honest with you, they don't, you know. But there's a fight between the Hoagland Superman and the Routh Superman, which was very cool. And there was a lot of action. I loved it. I loved hearing the John Williams theme. Come on, who doesn't love hearing the John Williams theme when you see Superman? I think, you know, it's crazy for these, you know, TV series and movies not to recycle that when they can. I mean, I understand wanting to try to go a different way once in a while or something, but I mean, that is just such an iconic piece of music that it's, you know, that rouses the spirits even when, you know, the depiction of Superman isn't that great, such as Superman Returns. All right, so that was cool. I like the way they gave Lois, they gave Iris something to do. I'm sure they would have given Felicity something to do had Emily Bett Rickards not begged off getting out of Arrow and the Arrowverse until apparently the last episode. I don't know exactly if that's going to be a cameo or a episode. We didn't see any of the Arrow actors here apart from Amel and Mia. I guess they're saving them for the Arrow portion of this. Would like to kind of see what goes on with Roy at this point. But lest I digress, then we have the storyline, of course, of the Kevin Conroy Batman. This was something else that was very exciting to me because I was hoping they were going to actually surprise us and allow him to wear the Batman costume. No such luck. This was probably the most disappointing aspect of the series, which is kind of difficult because there are different things that disappointed me. As I said, I kind of was disappointed that they couldn't show us more of the Donnerverse Superman. Like, they just killed off his entire supporting cast. And, you know, I knew they couldn't, like, bring in the supporting actors, some of which have died, others which would probably not do it. Not replay the roles, resume the roles. But in this case, I think it was kind of disappointing where the Kevin Conroy Batman doesn't ever put on the costume. I guess he's not allowed to put on the costume. You cannot have a Batman, for some reason, in costume in this Arrowverse. I don't know why. You would think the higher-ups would kind of, at least in this case, try to, you know, maybe accommodate with a Batman. I mean, especially Kevin Conroy. I mean, this is the man who played Batman for a generation. I mean, I think he's the definitive Batman for a generation. But he's playing basically the Batman v Superman Batman left to his own devices. I think this is what the Batman v Superman Batman would have become. And he's basically evil. He killed Superman. Supergirl finds this out, and Batwoman kind of has to take him to task. And again, they did a good thing here in showing that when Batman kills, Batman is evil. And too many movies, you know, they don't seem to understand that. They don't get that when Batman crosses that line, there's no coming back. And the Keaton Batman killed, and the Ben Affleck Batman killed, even the Christian Bale Batman killed, although I wouldn't say he really succumbed to a killing spree like the aforementioned others. I think the Val Kilmer Batman even killed. So it's comforting in a way to see that they understand that Batman is not supposed to kill, and Batwoman even confronts him on this, saying that you had that rule, and then he sort of says, look, you break the rule once, and then why have it, you know? That's kind of what the problem is. You break that rule once and you kill the Joker. What's to stop you from killing the Riddler next time? Or the Penguin, or Killer Croc. I mean, it's once you've killed, you've broken that code, and I can understand you don't necessarily become a mass murderer just by killing one person, but it's kind of like when you're put in Batman's position, you don't want to, you know what I mean? You don't want to cross any lines that you're going to regret later, because psychologically you've opened yourself up to it, And again, I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail here, but I do feel that they accomplished their purpose in that. While I do think that the Kevin Conroy Batman, though, was wasted. They should have done something more constructive with him than to just sort of give us that platitude and then have Batwoman kill him anyway. They kind of try to walk it back by saying, I guess, I don't know, she kicked him into some electrical equipment which kills him, but Supergirl was like telling her, don't try to save him or you'll die too. You know, I mean, it was kind of interesting. I don't know. One of the things that bugged me the most about this portion of the crossover is no costumes. Now, they seem to do this, they do this in all the shows frequently. There'll be an episode where the Flash never gets into costume. There'll be an episode where Arrow never gets into costume. There'll be an episode, generally they don't do it with Kara because her face is always shown, and I guess, it's not as cumbersome to her to have to put on the costume with the mask and the so on and so forth. And this was the episode that bugged me because they felt that this was the time to not wear any costumes. They did that last season in the crossover. They do it basically every season with one of the episodes. And when you're going to go all out, put all your chips in, this is the end of the world, and you're going to have all the superheroes get together, I want to see Superman. I want to see Supergirl and Batwoman in their costumes confronting a Batman in his costume. You know what I mean? This is the part. This is the time you want to do that. I want to see, just all those characters. I want to see them in costume. I mean, the Atom, stuff like that. We didn't really get too much of any of that at that point. All right, we're going to jump over now to the final storyline. There was so many storylines in the second episode that, again, we could have fleshed this out and made this an extra episode that would have given us a little more room to work with here. But again, the budget being what it is, it was amazing that they did what they did with the parameters they had to work with. So it's sort of just a pipe dream. It's not really a criticism. I'm sure they did all they could with the time and resources they had. But for instance, this was another storyline that was could have been fleshed out. The Sarah and John Constantine storyline. I still, if you haven't heard me review any of these other shows, I still think that John Constantine and Sarah are that's the couple. That's the couple that should be on Legends of Tomorrow. They're both sort of broken. They're both bi. They're both, they work so well together. They seem like they go well together, but they don't want to upset the apple cart. They need to have like a lesbian romance for Sarah. But again, like I said, she's bi, so you really don't have to be, obviously, whatever the character is what you play to. But in a situation like this, they go so well together. No dice. They don't do that. But I was happy to see them interact a lot here with the storyline of bringing back Oliver. Now, I understand doing this. This made the most sense to me because, it's one of those things like with the timeline, Flash can't keep going back. Otherwise, they had this storyline with Jay Garrick where he goes back and forth so many times to change the future. Jay Garrick basically had to sit him down and tell him the facts of life. With the Lazarus Pit, it's a little bit different. Now, they have been destroying the Lazarus Pits off-screen. This is something Thea and Roy were supposedly going to be doing. And Nyssa, I think. And, again, Nyssa hasn't showed up, but I think that's going to be an Arrow episode. They're going to just have basically all the Arrow players in that episode. But, so they find a Lazarus Pit on another Earth. I thought this was strange. They had a cameo of a creepy Jonah Hex, who apparently was going to come on to Mia. I don't know. That was a little uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable because I think he's supposedly a good guy, Jonah Hex. I didn't really understand what they were trying to intimate there, but of course he got his comeuppance from Sarah and Mia by by them taking him out pretty easily, but I thought that was kind of strange. They bring Ollie to a Lazarus Pit. He comes back the way they usually do, mindless and sort of a body without a soul. And, flash to, no pun intended, flash forward to the next episode. We're going to find out how they're going to restore his mind. So that is all on part 2 of this 3-part extravaganza. So now we will move on to part 3. And once again, if you have any questions or comments, let me know, and we will discuss them. I will discuss them at the end of it, though. I want to talk about the 3rd episode before we take any questions. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat now. I will get to them in about 10 minutes after this is I've gone through this 3rd part. All right, 3rd part, let's see. This is the Flash episode, I believe, because we see the whole Flash crew join and come on screen with... I don't think Jesse L. Martin, did he come into this episode? I don't remember seeing him. I don't think so, because I've seen his name in the credits, but he never actually shows up in this episode. But, yeah, we get Cisco, we get Killer Frost / Caitlin, we get Ralph Dibny, whose character I think has come into his own in the past few... maybe this past season, maybe the end of last season. I think Ralph has really come into his own, and I appreciate the character more and more. I think... I always liked the character, but I think he's found his niche, so to speak. Alright, so, yeah, let's see. What are we going to start with? Man, they kind of are... They're leading up to a fight between Batwoman and Supergirl after the last episode, because Supergirl gets it in her head that she can use the Book of Destiny to bring back her planet. Now, this is something I was tentatively disappointed with in the episode, originally the 1st episode, was that Kara seems to take her planet and her mother and her people dying like a champ. Now, I know she is a paragon of hope or whatever. Is that what they call her? I forget. I don't have all that in the notes. I know they were all paragons of something. But she does seem to take that pretty well, considering that's devastating news to anyone. And I think, like, for example, Black Lightning shows up in this, and I think he is a little bit more affected than Kara is. I mean, not to say that she is unmoved by what happens, but finally at this point, though, we realize that she wants to use the Book of Destiny, and I think that kind of alleviates my concern. That's why I always give these episodes time to breathe, and I don't want to completely jump the gun and criticize. Kara is hopeful. She thinks there's a way back. She thinks there's a way out. She thinks there's a way to fix these things. And I think that's, that's an important part of the character. I think she does reflect that, and I think that's something that she would do. Now, Batwoman wants to stop her, and I think there was a funny scene, the moment with Lex Luthor. And he's like, it could drive you mad. He plays it really well. And Batwoman wants to save Supergirl, I think, most of all from the possibility of losing her mind. Not only would she become a danger, possibly, but she would, lose a potential friend. I like the way they've set up Supergirl and Wonder Woman to be friendly, but not necessarily completely compatible. You know what I mean? It feels very much like what Batman and Superman should be, at least at first glance. You know what I mean? I liked it when, in the comics, Batman and Superman were closer, and they kind of could sit down and have a cup of coffee or whatever and not feel like, I don't agree with you and your mission statement. Well, I don't agree with you and the way you handle things. It feels very much, though, like their early interactions where it is like that. And Supergirl doesn't completely sort of trust, I guess I could say, Kate. And the same can be said of Kate to Kara. But there is a burgeoning respect where you can tell that Kate doesn't want to use kryptonite on Supergirl. And Supergirl, doesn't want to force a conflict with Kate. You know what I mean? There is a very good and palatable relationship there where there is mutual respect, while yet they're sort of reserved. They're sort of not, we're not there yet. We're going to have a cup of coffee and be besties the way sort of Supergirl was with Lena and so on and so forth. So I appreciated that. I thought it was pretty cool. And the fight is averted, of course, when Batwoman decides to try to talk to Supergirl and talk her out of it. And I liked that's the way it went. I mean, it felt like it could have very easily been an action scene, but it felt like an action scene that wasn't needed. It felt like this is the natural progression of what those characters would do and how they would interact with one another. And I applaud that they knew when not to fight just as much as they knew when to fight. That was my opinion on it anyway. We get Vibe's powers restored. That was something else that I was looking forward to, because Carlos Valdez, I think, apparently was trying to back out of the show last season. I've never heard confirmation on this, but not only was the rumor abounding, but it seemed like they minimized his role in the show. He was only in every third episode, I think, and had no major storyline until the latter half of the season, where he wanted to cure himself of his powers, and he did so. And the idea was, well, the door was left open, he wasn't killed off, there was no irrevocable, ending of the character, but he would lose his powers, and he would only be there to show up and help Team Flash, maybe in the lab for an episode or two, and then be back, living the life. But apparently, they've given Carlos a really good, juicy role this year on The Flash. And, of course, I like Cisco as a character. I love Carlos, the way he plays him. So this is a great thing. And it's nice to see that they pretty much, they've put their chips on having him continue on now in the series. I guess Carlos is happy with it. And Vibe is back. His powers are restored. The Monitor restores his powers. So again, I do want to mention that's great to feel that he's going to be a ongoing character. We get the Lucifer cameo. Now, again, I don't really watch Lucifer. I'm familiar with the show. I mean, I might have turned it on for a couple of minutes once or twice. It's sort of DC the way Constantine is DC. It's like a Vertigo book, I think, where it doesn't really have connectivity to the DC universe at large, only when they decide they want to sort of pull him in. And I guess Lucifer, from what I understand, is supposedly the actual devil of the DC universe. He is Lucifer, right? And this would make sense that Constantine knows him, because he deals with all the dark arts and all that mystical mumbo-jumbo stuff. And I thought the scene was a killer. It was great. He's on Earth 666, right? Who couldn't have saw that coming? But he's again another creepy old dude macking on Mia. She's got a lot of luck with that, huh? And Constantine knows how to work Lucifer, apparently, and he gets what he wants from him, a card to transport him to Purgatory, where, of course, they're going to try to save the soul of Oliver Queen. And, yeah, he was just a riot, and I don't know, maybe it's worth checking out Lucifer's series. I believe he got another season on Netflix, so it's possible maybe that I would check it out, but I don't know if the show's been canceled since then. They might be a fourth season up. I'm not sure. So yeah, let's move along here now. Let's see. We've got a new Adam introduction here. Choi. I can't remember the character's first name. I just remember Choi. But he's going to be the new Adam, apparently, because they're going to write Brandon Routh off the show, which I think is the biggest mistake they can possibly make. But I am going to, again, I'm not going to rant and rail about this. I'm going to reserve judgment and see what they do with Brandon Routh going forward. Because he and his hot wife both have a great role on Legends of Tomorrow. If that show goes down, or if they choose to spin off Brandon to another show, maybe it would be a better place for him, a better change of venue. I think, like a lot of people are suggesting, it would make the most sense if they would spin off Sarah Lance on Green Arrow and the Black Canaries next year. Because it would be kind of the Charlie's Angels of the Arrowverse, right? You'd have Dinah, Laurel of Earth 2 and Sarah, and then of course you'd have Mia. So that would be interesting if they did that. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Of course, that would mean, you know, I really don't like to lose a lot of the characters that are on that show. I mean, I love Mick Rory. He's great, Heatwave. But of course, you could always, like I said, it depends on what they're going to do for another series. Just interesting. I don't know. I'm spitballing there, I suppose. Let's see. All right. So before we get to anything else, let's take a look at the resolution thus far, anyway, of the Diggle, Mia, Constantine, and Sarah storyline, where they're trying to save Oliver in purgatory. It was, I don't know, I honestly am not sure how I feel about this. Now, they go to purgatory, which is, of course, Lian Yu, because Lian Yu means purgatory in Mandarin or something. And he momentarily attacks them. I did like to see Diggle getting some good focus in this episode. He got a scene with Sarah, which I always like it when, regardless of the show or the situation, I like it when you get two characters that are not used to interacting, but they're in the same sphere. Now, they're both like mainstays on Arrow, or at least Sarah was at one point, but we really don't see them interact very much. And I thought that was pretty cool, seeing them interact. Then we got the scene of Diggle and Oliver. And it was like, you know, when they're in purgatory. And that was really, really nice to see them two together, because it really goes back to just them two. They were the first two. Obviously, you know, it started off with Oliver being alone, and Diggle was the first one to find his way into the inner circle. So it was nice to have that moment as well. I'm hoping, although I think it probably will happen, that good things are going to happen for David Ramsey after this, that he's going to get some kind of Green Lantern series that they've been hinting at. I'm not sure if it's going to be the HBO Max one, or if maybe he will just play some version of Green Lantern, like, say, in a Legends of Tomorrow or some such team show where he just plays Green Lantern. I don't know, but, you know, I'm sure something will work out for him, and deservedly so. The Spectre shows up, and he basically gives the power of the Spectre to Oliver. Now, I don't fully understand this. Now, I've only watched it once. I'm probably going to watch it again, especially before the other two parts. But Oliver has got the power of the Spectre. Now, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I suppose he's going to stay dead, but he's got the powers of the Spectre, which means he can possess other bodies. Now, that could mean very different things. That could mean that he is going to survive on in his Oliver Queen body, because you got to remember the way that the show closed last season's Arrow, the suggestion was that he and Felicity would still live happily ever after. Although the suggestion now has been that maybe Oliver dies and that his spirit is going to live on in other bodies or something to that effect. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not sure if I even fully understand what they tried to communicate there. I think they could have explained that better, and I think they probably will going forward. But yeah, I didn't know too much about that. All right, so let us finish up here. Before we get to like the cliffhanger of the series, or this season, before the hiatus, let's talk about 90s Flash. Now, if you don't know anything else about me, the 90s Flash series is my single most favorite television show of all time. It was here way too briefly. It only got one season. Watched it as a kid, watched it as a teenager, loved it, absolutely loved it. It inspired me to become a comic book writer. Of course, I had other inspirations as well, Batman the Animated Series, other television shows, but my chief inspirational source, I will always point to The Flash. That show inspired me and gave me such creativity that I felt like I could do my own stories. It spoke to me on a level that very few shows and films or books or anything has. So I am both thrilled overjoyed and disappointed in the treatment of the 90s Flash in this episode. And we're going to go through all of those emotions right now. So, Elseworlds last season, the 90s Flash was unceremoniously pulled out of time, and somehow he got into the clutches, I suppose, of the Anti-Monitor, whom we just get a glimpse of in this. 3 episodes already, and we only see a glimpse of him in this 3rd episode. He is thrown on the cosmic treadmill. Again, shades of the actual comic. And if you don't know the actual comic, Barry Allen dies by running on the cosmic treadmill or something to that effect. Of course, in the original Crisis, both Barry Allen and Kara Zor-El die. The original, well, obviously not the original Flash, that was Jay Garrett, but the original Silver Age characters were both killed. And they kind of tipped their hand saying that they were both going to survive and Oliver Queen would take their place. But, you know, all bets are off now. So they've set this up from the very beginning that Barry Allen, even in season 1 of The Flash, he was going to disappear in the year 2024. I believe it was 24, and then they moved it down, they moved it up. They did all kinds of things because they didn't know when they were going to do Crisis on Infinite Earths. But the payoff was that Barry was going to die in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So they save the 90s Flash from this treadmill. And, you know, the nobility that 90s Flash has, he wanted to take the place of our Grant Gustin Barry, the contemporary Barry. And he steals the powers of Barry long enough for him to get back into the treadmill and to continue on, because if he stopped running on the treadmill, then the Anti-Monitor, his cannon would eat up another couple of Earths. And Black Lightning is brought in just at the right moment, and he tries his best to try to power down the machine. He can't do it. And so we get a couple of nice moments there with 90s Flash, a couple of seconds with Black Lightning, a couple of seconds with Grant Gustin. We get the great scene between Grant and his 2 co-stars saying farewell. Very emotional stuff. Great, you know, well written. Great, had impact, emotional impact. And then 90s Flash sacrifices himself by running himself to death on the cosmic treadmill and disintegrating. They mention Tina. He mentions Tina, that he married Tina, so we do get that resolution, because of course they were a on again off again during that show. It was always sort of, is he going to wind up with Tina? It was like it was one of the earliest shipping things that I was ever exposed to. I was shipping Barry and Tina before shipping was actually a thing. But the show ended before we could ever see that really truly realized. And they did confirm that he wound up with Tina, which was great. But my problem with this is, again, I could go off on a very long rant, but I'm hungry and tired. But I'll try to give this rant in as brief a time as possible. But I'm going to say the same thing here that I say with, for instance, Endgame, or the Disney trilogy of Star Wars. I don't necessarily feel the need to see my heroes die. I don't think that's necessarily something that I need for closure, that I need for a conclusion. I don't need to see them go out in a blaze of glory. I don't need to see them go out just at peace with themselves. I don't need to see them die. I didn't need to see my childhood hero, John Wesley Shipp's Flash, die. And they did a nice little homage to the show. They showed a clip of Barry and Tina when they were both young and handsome and beautiful. And not to say that they're not handsome and beautiful now, but I mean, you know, to evoke the show. And it was lovely. And to see him go out as a hero like that, as it happened in the comics. Now, as a comics purist, this is where I'm conflicted. I know that in the comics, this is how Barry Allen died. And I can't be too angry because I know in the comics they brought Barry Allen back. So I feel very strongly that they could bring Barry Allen back because that's the nature of comics. The heroes die, they come back. And I don't have the sense of finality here that I did with, say, you know, a Tony Stark with Iron Man. We know he's not coming back. I mean, if he does come back, it's going to be maybe as a cameo in some kind of flashback that, you know, happened between Civil War and Infinity War or something. But this did not seem as final, but it's a fitting death if they had to give 90s Flash a death. It's not, thank God, it's not a Captain Kirk death where it's like, nah, that's not the way Captain Kirk would have died in anybody's notebook. It kind of felt like the way I felt about maybe Han Solo's death in The Force Awakens. Kind of like it had to happen, but I really didn't want to see it happen. And I think, lastly, the problem I have with his death, though, it's kind of like a Mr. Spock thing, where it's like we needed the impact of the death, but we still don't want him to stay dead. You know what I mean? So I liked seeing the sacrifice, but I want to see the search for Spock next. You know what I mean? I don't think that cheapens it. Some people, I don't know why, but some people feel that when a character dies, I mean, it depends on the situation. If a character dies, I don't necessarily think automatically we should bring him back. I think most of the time they should stay dead. But the thing is when it's a high-impact character like Spock, like 90s Flash in this case, I think there's more story to tell, and I think you can have the impact of the death make sense and give you the feels, so to speak, but then you can still bring that character back and show more story to tell. We did not get enough of the 90s Flash. Now, had I been in charge of the Flash television show, we would already have had an arc where Barry goes to Earth 90, you know, with a bunch of other characters. You know, you could take Iris, you can take Killer Frost, Cisco, heck, take Joe, take Ralph, take them all. Take them over to 90s Earth. We already had John Wesley Shipp and Amanda Pays on the payroll. We also had Alex Desert. We also had Vince, I'm forgetting his name, but you know, who played Bellows. You have all those actors on the payroll. You have them, you know, in the show proper. Bring them over and do an Earth 90 saga. Do a 3-part story arc. Heck, if it was me, I would do a whole season set in 90s Earth. And we could bring back Mark Hamill. He's also not been shy to appear in these shows. So that's why I feel that I'm conflicted in, had they done that already, had you given us a full story arc with 90s Flash, had him interact with Barry and the cast. So far, he's only had like 2 interactions with Grant. That's not a decent send-off when you've had only 1 or 2 interactions. Show us maybe some of what's going on Earth 90. It's a highly stylized Earth. It could still look like the 90s. But again, they didn't really want to go there. I don't know, maybe. I think it rests also on John Wesley Shipp if he wants to continue on with that character. I think he very much did it for the fans. He's a great, I don't know how to put it. He's a great fan of the fans. You know, he's a friend of the fans, in other words. He's great and very approachable. I unfortunately haven't been able to meet him in convention yet, but I have interacted with him on Twitter. He's a great guy. And I think he probably would do, like, maybe a 3-part arc on The Flash. And that's what I wanted to see. And so, since we didn't get that, and we went straight to his death, we got his introduction last year and his death this year, it does feel like there's a lot of story yet to be told that was wasted. And I think there's still a possibility with time travel and different dimensions and Earths and this and that. Still very possible that we could have that. I don't know what they're waiting for to go there. Again, like I said, maybe it's just Shipp is not willing to really invest a lot of time in the suit and want to redo his role as that character. But he still plays the Flash exactly like he did in 1991 or whatever it was. And, you know, you could feel the continuity. This is the same Barry Allen, just older. And the costume still looks great. They still played that music. And, oh, you want to talk about chills. People probably got the chills when you heard the Christopher Reeve Superman theme. I got the chills when I heard dun 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 dun. That, for me, was the defining moment when he was on that treadmill. And again, I have conflicted feelings about it, but that really brought the feels to me. And like I said, I would love to see more. I just, please, let us see more. Again, very sad. And again, just, I love that show. If anybody hasn't seen, you owe it to yourself, because you can binge that in like maybe 2 weeks, maybe a week. I don't know. It depends. It's a full, you know, in those days they did like what, 22, 23 episode seasons. So you get the full season. And just, you owe it to yourself to go through that show. That is the greatest TV show that I've ever been witness to, and certainly the greatest superhero TV show. And with one of the greatest superhero portrayals, I would put John Wesley Shipp up there with anybody, with the Christopher Reeve Superman, with the Michael Keaton Batman. You know, he did a great portrayal of Barry Allen, and he felt very much like the, you know, the Bronze Age Flash. I mean, this is sort of the passing of the torch. Again, something else that I don't really like. I don't really like seeing passings of the torch, but this is the death of the Bronze Age Flash. Now we have the modern Flash in Grant Gustin. It's kind of a sad thing, but again, briefly before we wrap it up, Black Lightning is thrown into this. Feels very incidental. You know, Black Lightning is probably, even counting Batwoman, the least connected to the Arrowverse. And to see him just sort of get thrown into here was jarring. I did like that they took the time to sort of get him up to speed. We got a scene with him and Grant Gustin I thought was fantastic. I think he would be great going forward as a ongoing character in the Arrowverse. They don't seem to want to play him in this sandbox for some reason. It seemed only like because this was the, you know, all hands on deck, they wanted him in this, but I would love to see him interact more, because he's a different character than what we're playing with basically in the Arrowverse. He's an older, you know, an older character. Chris Williams, an older actor. So we got sort of some, you know, a leadership character, you know, someone that's a seasoned veteran of superheroics. We don't have too many of those. You know, obviously, you know, we fold in the Thunder and Lightning into the storylines. It would be interesting, but I don't know if they're going to do that going forward. That's one of the curiosities. With all the Earths destroyed, what Earths are coming back? Is it simply going to be Earth 1 and all these other characters are saved just so they could migrate to Earth 1? Or is it going to be back to business as usual? Is it going to be a accumulation of many different factors? I don't know. This is what's the interesting cliffhanger. Let's see. Oh, Harbinger. Let's end it. Let's talk about the cliffhanger before we end it here. Harbinger is taken over by the Anti-Monitor. She gets brainwashed, or I guess getting completely taken control of. Pariah sends the main heroes away to a time displacement area or something where you know, they're existing outside of time and space. Superman, the Brandon Routh Superman, apparently dies, but it turns out that it's Luthor impersonating Superman. And as I said, Luthor is like the Gollum of the Crisis. He still has his part to play. And it's interesting that we need to depend on a villain, because you got to remember, it's always been like this with Luthor and other characters, sort of like Doctor Doom, I think the Kingpin. We have villains where the preservation of life is important to them. It's not that they want to destroy the world or create chaos or whatever. They just want to be in charge. They want to have subjects to rule. They don't want the world to end. And so I think this was a pretty fitting place to put Luthor, you know what I mean? I think this was something. And seeing the interactions between Luthor and Supergirl was interesting. It was funny also, though, he didn't want to believe that Clark Kent was Superman. That was interesting. I hope they carry on with that one. So another thing I wanted to mention is they were saying that they had to find 7 heroes, the Paragons or something like that. Now, the interesting thing is that for the most part, the leaders of all these shows were the Paragons, right? I think the only one they didn't was the Reeve Superman, the quote-unquote Reeve Superman, the Routh Superman, was one of these Paragons. Apart from that, it was Supergirl, the Flash, Martian Manhunter, right? I think they could have done better if they would have said, look, you guys are the ones to find the Paragons, and the Paragons are not Batwoman and, you know, the Flash and whatever. They're the Burt Ward Robin, the Kevin Conroy Batman, of course the Routh Superman, the John Wesley Shipp Flash. That's what I was hoping it was going to be, and I kind of figured they weren't going to do that, but that's what I wanted to see. The Linda Carter Wonder Woman, she was noticeably absent in this. There was never confirmation that she was going to be in this, but again, this is another character that you had on the payroll. She was in Supergirl for, you know, a recurring character for, I think, 2 seasons. They could have very easily brought Linda Carter in to play Wonder Woman as one of the Paragons. And again, you know, it's one of these things where you really want to see them come back in costume. I don't expect Burt Ward to come back in costume, you know. I don't necessarily expect to see Linda Carter back in costume. Of course, she's still gorgeous, even at her age, but they would have to tailor her a Wonder Woman costume appropriate to her age, and ditto with Burt Ward. But what you do with these characters is not necessarily have them jumping off buildings and stuff, but maybe Dick Grayson has some kind of computer knowledge that is important, you know, to facilitate something against the Anti-Monitor. The same thing with Wonder Woman. You write something for each and every one of them. That's kind of what I would have done, and I think what they should have done. Instead, they kind of went with just all the CW stars of all the shows are basically the Paragons, and we'll throw in Brandon Routh's Superman because, hey, he's actually a star of one of these shows too, you know? So that's one of the areas I thought was disappointing, could have been done better. I honestly didn't think they were going to get more out of Tom Welling, so I wouldn't have made him a Paragon, to be totally honest with you. But like I said, the other ones that I mentioned, that should have been it. That's what I would have done. Again, of course, it depends. I'm not in the position to know what the bargaining price is. Like, for instance, with Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor, everybody wanted to see him back, and even as someone who's not a big fan of Smallville, I enjoyed his portrayal of Luthor. It was a good portrayal, it was a solid performance, and he was very good. But he couldn't commit to the time. There was a lack of knowledge, supposedly, of the script that he didn't like. Obviously, a lot of people were going to turn it down because of money, because you got to fly up to Vancouver, do a role, and then, you know, they only have so much in the budget to pay, particularly a movie actor in a television miniseries. So, you know, I don't know what kind of a fee that some of them would command. I don't know that Linda Carter would command, like, an unpayable fee. I don't know if Burt Ward would have balked at doing more than a cameo. You know what I mean? These are questions that would come up, but I would probably have still made the offer to them anyway to be a fuller character in these shows. Like I said, there was so much more for 90s Flash to have done, and you could still have the same resolution to his character, but, you know, could have had him actually be a larger player in it. And again, you've got a whole story to tell, and they're trying to fit in different things too, with Jonathan the baby and Iris, and it's kind of hard to find places for everybody. But again, you know, with the time available and the money available, I can kind of see where they got basically everything that we wanted, pretty much. Whatever was feasible, they put in for us. So, anyway, that's about gonna wrap it up. We've been going at it here for over an hour. We did, yeah, basically about a half hour for every episode. But I am very curious what you think. How did you feel about Crisis on Infinite Earths? Did you like all the episodes? Did you like parts of the episodes? Are you looking forward to the next 2 episodes, which will be the Legends of Tomorrow episode and the Arrow episode, which will be the final episode of Arrow for all time, so far as we know? Stephen Amell might, I don't know, he might turn up, you know, sometimes these things happen where a character will come back, but for all intents and purposes, yeah, the ending of this Crisis on Infinite Earths will be the ending of Arrow, and the Arrowverse will continue, but it will probably look very different, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works itself out. Okay, so if I'm to give this a rating, my favorite part was probably the 3rd episode, followed by the 1st episode, and then the 2nd episode. So I'd rank them like that. Episodes 3, 1, and 2 as the most strong and powerful from 3 to 1 to 2. On the whole, I will probably give this... Now again, I haven't seen the whole thing as one unit, so I really am hesitant to give this a rating, but I would probably say I would give this an A-. I would give it an A-, possibly a B+. I would probably give it 4 stars, I think, at this point. Probably 4 stars out of 5, which is basically an A- or a B+. I'm going to say A- right now because it left me with a generally positive feeling. Although, like I said, some things bugged me, and some things could have gone better. But again, given the parameters of what they had to work with, I think they did a very good job. And like I said, they didn't go too SJW on us. Last season, I loved the first episode of Elseworlds, and then it was just degenerated by the 3rd episode. Here, and the same thing with Crisis on Infinite Earths, there was a lot of SJW platitudes. There wasn't anything here that I felt was overtly SJW. I don't feel like they were getting on the soapbox at any particular point. So that's why I think earns it also a little bit more favorable status from me. So yeah, at this point I'm going to feel confident with an A-. Alright, so until next we meet, I want to thank you for joining us for this very special live stream as Johnnie Torch Reviews Crisis on Infinite Earths, parts 1 through 3. And we will see you back after the final 2 episodes in the crossover come January. The 2nd week of January, at least, is when the show comes back from the winter hiatus. And we also will see you again on Saturday when we're going to do our review of the Wonder Woman 1984 first trailer and the Ghostbusters Afterlife first teaser trailer. And also, of course, be sure to check out the last video we did, which was the Black Widow first trailer review. Yeah, we get a lot of trailer reviews out in December usually. That's when they release these trailers for some reason. Coming up in subsequent weeks, we are going to have, as I said, Batman 66 meets Wonder Woman 77, the comic review. I review that graphic novel, and that's coming up pretty soon. We got a couple of more surprises that I pre-recorded, plus our regular show on Saturday. And, of course, coming up in the new year, we've got the new year coming up because I pre-recorded some stuff because I'm not going to be doing too many videos between Christmas and New Year's. That's pretty much a tough time to find time to do videos. So I'm already planning ahead to get a couple of videos out for that ahead of time. But after the new year, we of course are going to have the Rise of Skywalker review. Yeah, I'm going to have to see it, I suppose. Not boycotting it, but again, I'm not in a hurry to go see it. And I'm probably not going to get around to it until after the new year because I'm not paying more for tickets than humanly possible. So I'm going at a Tuesday matinee when when the showing is half price. And since Tuesdays are going to be Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve in the foreseeable future, yeah, I'm not going then. So it'll probably be sometime after the first week of January. So that's up on the docket as well. So until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be seeing you again real soon.